In this video I'll show you how to paint miniature orc skin, so stick around for that. Salutations ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Maniacal Miniatures. In this video I'll show you how to paint miniature orc skin as stated in the teaser, and I'll show you how I do it personally, and yeah, the results are the same as shown in the thumbnail, and I recently concocted that little recipe, and I'm really psyched about that. So I hope you like it as well, and I hope that you learned something from this video. Furthermore, the video from last week was the first video that I've done in the painting tutorial series that I'm about to release a couple of standalones in. The first one was how to paint miniatures fast and simple, for those of you who have a ton of unpainted miniatures and just want to get something done to tabletop standard fairly quickly, and something painted to a standard that you can go back and revisit later and add more details to. So I hope that is useful for you. I will put a link up here so you can go check that out if you haven't seen it. And that's Miniature Painting 101. This is another standalone for Orruk skin, or orc skin as it's called more generally. So yeah, let's get around to painting some orc skin. So guys, here we are. For this skin recipe you will need to have a couple of different Citadel paints. We will start with applying a base coat of Deathworld Forest. Then we will shade the miniature with Estonian camo shade. After that we will apply a couple of layer strokes of Elysian green. And after that some Nurgling green highlights around the miniature. And finally we will glaze the miniature with Waywatcher green. And that is basically sorry about that, I have a toad in my throat. Then we will get a result that looks something like this. Yeah, so let's try. I'm using 3 different brushes for this. I'm using a medium, a small layer brush, and a medium shade brush. This gives me excellent control of a miniature of this size. We will be painting this guy and just the skin for the purpose of this video. So I'm gonna start with my medium brush. I'm gonna start with the Deathworld Forest, then I'm gonna apply it to my wet palette. So I'm just gonna start with getting a little Deathworld Forest onto my brush here, and we're just gonna lay it on some muscles, applying it in a neatly thinned layer. So what I want to do at this stage is just go back across the entire miniature and just make sure I haven't missed any spots in behind the armor plates or yeah, along some of the edges. And then I just go over the entire miniature and make sure that it's an even layer, and I apply a second layer, a thin layer of the base coat where the primer might shine through. So just make sure you have a nice clear coat of Deathworld Forest before you move on to the next step. Step 2. Shade. So what we're going to do now in this second step is just apply Estonian camo shade across the entire miniature, or rather all the skin parts. So now we've just loaded some shade onto the brush, and we're going to go across all the green parts and just apply this quite liberally, because we like to darken him down quite a bit. And if you're not happy after the first layer of shade, you can always go back and shade him again and add additional coats to darken his skin down. But I would recommend going over it in several turns instead of just applying more shade in the first go, because that way you will get a much more even spread of color. So what we want to do is just leave some of this shade in the recesses, so those places will pop once we highlight it later. So having now shaded the entire miniature, we're just gonna go ahead and wait for this to dry, and this will take between 15 and 30 minutes depending on how much shade you've applied. You can speed up the process with a hairdryer. So yeah, see you after this has dried. So So being efficient, I just painted his pants and repainted some of his armor that I touched with the green. And now the shade is almost dry, so we can go ahead and start applying the first layer coat, which was the Elysian green. And yeah, what we want to do is just apply this in some thin strokes. So now we're just gonna go ahead and still use our medium layer brush, and we're gonna apply some thin layers of the Elysian green. So we're just gonna go ahead and follow the textures of the muscles, or rather the curvature. So if the muscle makes a downward curve, we carry the brush alongside it, just neatly contouring the muscle, making the illusion of texture. And you want to use as many strokes as possible and make them as thin as possible to really get that nice detailing out. This is basically, this entire step is just being really careful, making some really thin lines and just picking out all the little detailing and not putting any of the layer paint into the recesses that we just shaded, and then just apply hundreds of little lines. The more the better. You could just apply 2 or 3 lines to each muscle, but that will simplify the effect, and just applying as many as possible will give you the best results. So have fun just texturing the muscles like this. It is quite entertaining to me, so I hope you enjoy that as well. But it can become a bit of a chore if you have like 100 orcs you need to do. So just use the amount of effort that seems reasonable to you. But of course you could add more lines with your characters and your special units than you would with your core infantry. So just be practical about it and yeah, apply those lines as you see fit. And now I'm just gonna do his hands, and I'm just gonna pick out his knuckles first to really make those heightened edges pop. So, and you want to do this for the entire miniature, so the highest peaks of any point of his skin you're just gonna pick out with this Elysian green when you go over the miniature. So I'm just gonna continue with the lines along his fingers, and I'm just gonna get back to you after I'm done with that. So now I'm just done with the entire face also. You just want to go ahead, and if there's one point on the miniature that you really want to do a little more color, it's really the face, because that's where most of the character is in this miniature. So I hope you can see all the lines. It might be a bit difficult to see on camera, but in real life there are hundreds of little lines going across his muscles and features. So that's the layer. When I reach the face, I just switch to my small layer brush, because those features are quite small. So now we are on to the second step of layering, and that is the Nurgling green, which we will apply less of than the Elysian green, but in the same manner. So as many thin lines as you can, accentuating the muscles and features of the miniature, and just be a bit more liberal with this around his brow, his lips, his ears, the tips of his fingers, and the edges of the muscles, just to accentuate all the little features and the grimace on his face and stuff like that. And of course you could go for an even smaller brush if you wish to do these lines really fine. So that's his hand done, the upper side at least. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that to the rest of the body, and when I get to the face I'll just show you again. So now we are done with the main body, as you can see, progressing nicely. I've added many more lines to this than I did my last miniatures, as I'm also personally improving in this technique. I like to make a flat brush, so just drag it along so you get a flat brush, and then going against the flat, you just drag some gentle lines. If you do this with an even lighter color, you could crisscross it and make it look like he is scarred. So if you went ahead and applied ochre camo, or perhaps even some sort of beige color, you can make it look like he has seen some battle. Yeah, and that's basically this step done. If you went ahead and did this with an entirely different color, you could actually make tattoos on him as well. So if you went blue or orange at this stage, you can make it look like he was tattooed. So the next step is glazing, and we're just going to apply this like the shade, with the exception that the shade is meant to go into the recesses and this is meant to go on the flat areas. So kind of try and keep this out of the recesses. It's a bit more syrupy, so it should not be impossible. So while you apply it, just drag it onto the muscles instead of into the recesses or around the muscles. So there's a thing to be mindful of while applying the glaze. This is supposed to go everywhere and just keep him a bit more consistently green. And we apply the shade because it blends together the already applied colors, and it makes the color transition a lot smoother. So this is why we do the glaze. And just be sure not to let it pool. This is the most important thing when glazing. You shouldn't allow it to let it pool in the eyes and the ears and stuff like that, because it will obscure a lot of detailing like that. So just make sure that it goes on top of the muscles and not into the recesses like a shade, because this is not the purpose of the glaze. If you like a more sickly looking orc, you could always glaze it with the Lamenter's yellow glaze instead, which is a yellow glaze. As you can see here, I'm just letting my brush suck up the glaze from the recesses, and I'm just gonna reapply it to the muscles. So that is the glazing done. And now we just need to be careful not to let it pool in his eyes and ears. So just be mindful while this is drying. So yeah, he's totally done now, and I'll just let him dry it, and then I'll put him in the light box for you, and I will show you the finished result once he's dried.
So guys, I hope you liked this video tutorial on how to paint orc skin. If you find this video useful and you liked it, consider leaving it a thumbs up and subscribe at the red button down below, as it really helps me out a great deal and I really appreciate it a ton. And if you think that some of your friends who collect Orruks or orcs would benefit from this video, consider sharing it with them, as it also helps me out a great deal. And if you missed the first week's video on miniature painting 101, you can check out how to paint them fast with this video right here. And yeah, I hope you enjoy that as well. And all that's left to do is just remember, and in the immortal words of Winston Churchill, success is not final and failure is not fatal. It's this courage to continue that counts. So continue, and see you in my next video.